Wholeness, welcome. This is Josh of Inner Skilled, and today I have Jennifer Edwards with me. Jennifer, how's it going today?
Great. Thanks for having me, Josh.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So why don't you tell people who Jennifer is and what kind of work she does?
Yeah. Yeah.
If that's
So
proper English, I'm sorry about that.
that's okay. This isn't an English class. This is financial wellness. So it's okay. We can make all the little faux pas there that we want to. So my name is Jennifer Edwards. I am the founder, CEO, and senior financial wellness specialist at my company, Breakthrough Financial Wellness. And what we are trying to do is help people heal their relationship with money. That so much of our financial success is not really being addressed in the way that will lead to true peace around money, to address the emotional and the psychological, sometimes even neurological. In fact, most of the time, there's some kind of neurological component to why we aren't as successful as we want to be, relationship stuff. So those things around money, when you think of like a financial, I call them a hang up, like a financial hang up, that may be more than just needing greater financial literacy. Like sometimes we know what we need to do and we still can't do it. And that's where we come in.
Well, right on. I'm imagining you address this issue from like what's wrong and problems and, people coming to you for help and focusing a lot on the negative aspects of this. Why don't we start before we go there? Because obviously we
Mm-hmm.
can't deny because
Mm-hmm.
that's the way things are, right? For who
Mm-hmm.
I'm imagining with a lot of people you work with. But let's talk about like what does financial health look like? What is that kind of, I guess, paint the picture of
Sure.
what's actually the positive side of this?
Yeah. So the way that I describe whether or not you're actually healthy with money is that you're not living in a place of regret, constant regret, and where you're wishing that you had done something different, and that we're living in a space of around consciousness. So it's not so much that like you might still not be able to, like say you have a savings rate goal of 20% or something. But if you understand what maybe your impediments to doing that are, or if you understand that there are all of these different factors that are keeping you from being able to do that, or if you're like, hey, we're in a situation right now where we might have to take a pause on that. It's really more about getting to that place of awareness and consciousness around our decisions with money. And then the other stuff kind of falls into place. It's like, okay, now I know why I'm doing what I'm doing with money, what the basis of all of these decisions isn't just that, so much in our culture, our financial mistakes or our financial situation is placed squarely on the shoulders of the individual. And there's so many other factors that impact our ability to be successful with money, and our definition of success might even be different. And there's not even room for that. So yeah, it's more like, are we doing things mindfully? Are we spending in ways that is in alignment with who we really want to be? Recognizing that there are limitations placed on us from outside influences.
Very good. So I used to work in kind of more of a corporate world in marketing years and years ago. I've been out of that for so long. Let's just say the people that I encounter now more in spiritual circles, you kind of have two camps, and I can see it both ways. You've got the people who like eschew money and say everything should kind of be free, it should be all generosity and, mutual support. Then, but a lot of times some of these people have like I don't know if it's a chip on their shoulder or like they think money is like the root of all evil.
Mm,
We've got this thing, or that, yeah, that there's so much kind of greed and corruption tied up with
mm-hmm.
money. And there is an association there for sure. But then you have the other people and I don't interact with too many of these, but on the other extreme, like, this is just like a mirror of my success. Spirit wants me to be so abundant and so it turns into like this spiritual, either materialism or spiritual
Mm-hmm.
greed, where they kind of justify certain things in order to have money. And so, yes, of course, I think the middle ground here is bills need to be paid. There needs to be like an ethical lifestyle or right livelihood, right? So
Mm-hmm.
where is the money coming from? And then also generosity for me is really important. It's like, what is the
Mm-hmm.
intention behind when I'm contemplating giving, while I'm giving, and then after the giving? And so everybody benefits from generosity, especially the giver. And there has to be a receiver too. So if some people have a hard time receiving, but if there's no receiver, then there can be no generosity when it comes around money too. So I'm wondering about if you have anything to say about these. I know this is kind of not conventional, where most of the working world looks at things like this. It's not that practical, but the energy behind this too, and people's outlook and relationship and views, just this little slice of it.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in what you were just saying. One thing that I think it's really important to understand is that money, I think of it, one analogy for it that may be helpful is that it's like a store of energy. So I trade into, well, if I'm employed, then I trade into my employer, my emotional energy, my physical energy, my mental energy, and they remunerate that with these, it's not even dollar bills anymore, right? It's this digital, um, remuneration that goes into my account. And you could kind of think of it as like a battery. Like if the dollar is kind of like a little battery, then it's not so much that the dollar itself has any value. The battery itself, unless I plug it into something, unless I'm doing something with it, it doesn't perform any function. Nobody's just, it really should be. And we know also, if we think of money as energy, energy is not ever created or destroyed. It's only transferred. So if we think about our money as needing to be something, this is why it's called currencies. It's supposed to flow, right? It's supposed to go from one person to the next and to the next and to the next. And so as it moves around, that energy continues to impact all those different areas where it goes. So if I have a lot of money come to me, so that's a lot of store of energy, more than maybe I need to live the life that I'm trying to lead, then I can pass it on to somebody else. Also, what am I buying with that? What am I buying with those things? I'm buying, am I buying experiences? Am I buying time with my family? Am I paying somebody else? Am I trading some of that money like to a housekeeper or to somebody to fix my car because I don't know how to do those things? If I don't know how to fix a car or, remodel a house or something. So I think that a lot of times we're living in a state where it's talked about, money is just kind of talked about as the mechanism toward happiness, and it's really not. It is not the thing that makes you happy. The things that you can do with the batteries can enrich your life. You can bring people into your circle. You can connect more easily. You can lift somebody else out of a burden, and that will lift you too. We know a lot about generosity and how it does lead to happiness, to greater happiness. And that's when those connections are deeper. One of the things that has happened with our tax code and those kinds of things is that the money is pulled out and it's given to other people, and we're completely left out of that process. And so to try to make your generosity as salient as possible, to find some person, and you know the name, you know their situation, to at least do that on some kind of a regular basis, whether it's somebody on the street that you're handing a dollar bill to, or whether it's somebody in your community that needs help for some specific reason. We can't change that tax code to make it so that we're all aware of that. That would probably be overwhelming for us. But it is, as communities have gotten bigger and more disconnected, these kinds of systems have been put in place. So yeah, there's room for all of those ideas, and as we're fleshing it out, that's one of the things that I try to help people understand is that, like, we're not really taught how to think about money very well. In fact, our belief system that we formed in childhood is still the one that's usually driving our decisions, unless we have explored it and vetted it and, decided, are we going to hold on to this value of money is the root of all evil? Or are we going to replace that with something else that serves us better? If we understand that it's really that idea of corruption of the resource, deciding that we're going to identify with the money that we have instead of the values that we really want to live by. One of the things that I teach my clients to try to do is to start with, like, writing an obituary for yourself. It's kind of a weird exercise, but a lot of people will go through that, and it'll help inform, like, if you were to die today, what would you want people to say about you? Would you want people to say, man, she was really good at making money and had a lot of money in the bank? That's not really what I want to say. My kids would say something about my money for sure. They would say she certainly tried to teach us how to be successful with our money and also how to be healthy around it. We talk a lot about those things. So making sure that you're living your life in alignment with that and you're using that store of energy of money in pursuit of that life.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of having identifying core values and then orienting my life towards those. It helps with decision making and aspirations and onward leading paths. Are you open to also exploring like the whole money system at its root? Because I know a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people don't really know a lot about this. And from my understanding is that the banks just type zeros in the computer when people get a loan, created out of thin air, and they don't actually have that money, and then charge interest on it when there's not enough to go around. And so the whole thing is a debt-based, like fiat currency, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
system.
Yeah, for sure. It's
But
Fiat.
before we do that, the store of value. So when you're talking about that, circulating energy, and I'm familiar with all this notion and the energetics behind it. But what are we talking about? Really long-term projects and saving, And actually, the nice thing about like gold and silver, I feel, is that it has like a real energetic component for some that are
Mm-hmm. It
energetically
does. It's
sensitive.
obviously giving
So
off a
yeah, exactly,
frequency.
and that, according to some, is really the only true money. The rest is just kind of, really kind of a fictional based.
It is totally
It only
based in
has
trust.
it only has value because we believe it has value, and we
Exactly.
we have this social agreement that it's worth something and I can do something with it. But it's ones and zeros in a computer or pictures of dead presidents here, right? So, but like if we're
Not
saving
all of them are
up,
presidents, but yeah.
right, right. Benjamin Franklin, thank you. Yeah. But if we're trying to save up money, for a big project, we're not going to be temporarily circulating it like you talked about, right? But then again, so if you have any advice on that, like long-term financial goals and how the circulation works when one's trying to build up a nest egg or a big storage thing and not have to go and maybe rely on the banking system to
Mm.
throw a lot of usury and interest away, that people are getting rich by doing this debt-based fiat currency system, charging interest and things like that. So yeah, and then the Federal Reserve in the central banking system, IMF, all this, Bank
Mm-hmm.
of International Settlements,
Mm-hmm.
and all this kind of parapolitical things around the banking system and all.
So let's go back to kind of the very beginning of currency and why it was even established, and then maybe we can see how we got where we are a little bit. Just a quick overview because I don't want to get too far in the weeds to people, but I do want to get to this idea of how do you actually build real security? I think that's the main question that you're asking, because if it's kind of a house of cards feeling, then how are you actually building security? So the reason that currency exists is because the bartering system got very cumbersome for trade. So if you have corn and I have barley and I want barley and you want corn, that's very easy. But what if player number, D 3 countries over has some good that or service that I want and I only have barley? So the currency was created and it's supposed to be something that is not very easy to find. It has to be kind of rare. If it's just something that everybody can pick up, then, and that maybe that's kind of speaks to what you were saying. If it can just be created out of thin air, then it loses its importance. And so and then you put symbols on it to kind of verify that this is actually currency that can be, traded for goods and services. And it is always based on trust. It always has been. We all kind of agree to participate in this system because if my employer had to keep on hand all of the goods and services that I need, then, that's going to be too cumbersome. In fact, we had that. There's a lot of, even in the 20s, 30s, even up to the 40s, there were big corporations and they would give you like tickets. They weren't even really dollars. They were like, and then you would go to the company store to get your goods, right? And so that was a system, that a small little banking system where the corporation determined not only your pay but also what you could get in trade for that pay. And they kind of just expected you weren't going to get ahead. You were just going to, that week's food, that's how much you made. Heaven forbid if something happened to your ability to make money, because there was no other way to store that up.
Sold my store, sold my
My
soul to the
soul to the
companies, and his
company
company's
store.
store. We know that
Yeah.
lyric, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, that's not too long ago in our history. So you said a couple of things like building up a nest egg in such a way that we wouldn't have to rely on the system. Well, the nest egg it's a very interesting time of history because we are, as human beings, for the first time ever evolutionarily, like living for decades beyond really our productivity years. So, we might not be healthy enough to, like, let's say it was manual labor, like, if we were trying to actually grow our own food, our bodies are surviving much longer than our ability to really take care of ourselves. So this is why retirement savings and things like that have evolved and emerged, and why things like the Social Security system was enacted was because there were people that were living beyond, we weren't all dying at age, 50 from a heart attack. And then there were people that had, people were complaining to the government about homeless old people and saying, we don't think that this is right, or, it's probably distressing to us because maybe as a society, we knew that we should be taking care of them because they're so vulnerable, right? So we're in this vulnerable place for a long period of time. And we really, who should be taking care of that? The culture gets to decide that. I mean, different cultures have decided different things. And our culture has decided that, you can basically save up your extra disposable income through your working years and take care of yourself mostly. The government is there to do like a very minimum baseline to try to keep us from being destitute. So there are services in there for that. But really, when you think about where true security comes from, it's this system is based on trust. And if ever, and we've seen this historically, I mean, lots of countries have had these experiences. And I mean, if I'm being honest, at some point America will. It's a cycle. Every civilization has gone through, and we'd be that would be naive to think that America would never go through that cycle. How long it would take, I don't know. But if you want to build true security, I would say that it's kind of an illusion. Like, life is always going to be unpredictable. We've had a lot of years where you can have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen in the future, but you and it's worked out. But at any point that could not be working out anymore. So the first kind of thing and I don't really, with my clients, I'm like, yeah, we're going to work with the system that we have, because to work with the system that we can't imagine, don't know what it is, there's no way to prepare for that. But I do talk about how really building your community as well as your monetary resources. If you were to open up your bank account app one day and just see zeros across the board because we'd either been hacked or somebody had stolen, all of the US's money, or something had happened, where would you go? What would you do? Well, hopefully you would have some friends and some family, and maybe some stores in your home of some food, and hopefully you'd know somebody that, if things were really falling apart, you could band together, pool your resources, your actual physical resources. And even in those circumstances, again, gold and silver, you can't eat them. So that's, again, just based on trust. Like, I'm going to say, here's some gold. Can I have this commodity that you have? And that person has to trust that they're going to be able to take that gold and go get what they need. So it's all based on that, we've kind of all agreed that we're going to live under this system. And it, based in I think it's the 30s, the Keynesian economics, which is really where there isn't any end to it. Like, it will grow forever until who knows what. I mean, this is the first experiment that we've ever had of Keynesian economics in the world, in a free market system, some semi-free market system that we have.
Yeah, as long as they can keep printing money, they can keep kicking the can down the road. We've said all these governments owe all this money, but who do they owe it to? So it's such a wild system. Some people are doing this now. I like this term, exit and build. So I have a couple and their kids. They're pretty much off grid. They have the option to go back on grid if they want, but they have like chickens and They might have gotten rid of their chickens
Kind of
now,
homesteading.
and gardening. Yeah, it is a homestead, and so they're experimenting with that after exiting real estate. And yeah, they have all kinds of great lessons. I like having kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because not being a total Luddite or naysayer, but also, okay, explore alternatives. What are, like you're saying, there is no ultimate security. Plus, we're going to
Hmm.
die, and we
Hmm.
won't be able to take it with. Like you said, the obituary thing. That's a really great option to do. And so like, what do we do? I always say people can be, if you can't be threatened by homelessness, and you can't be threatened, so to speak, by like inheriting multi-generational wealth, where now you can't do pretty much anything you want to do other than manage that money. So these are kind of the two extremes of control
You
that
could
people, I
you
think,
could
have.
decide the homelessness thing is probably imposed on you,
Exactly.
but
But
the
this is
but the
what
other
people
one.
fear. People fear, right? Like, they don't want to do that. They don't want to be that. So they'll
Hmm.
do all kinds of things they'd rather not do under the threat of being kicked out of their house and being homeless. So
Sure.
people will go live paycheck to paycheck, or do lots of stuff they don't want to do in their life because
Sure.
that fear is there.
There's a saying like hunger is a great motivator, and certainly corporations and the governments, they know that, they want to keep you just enough, give you just enough that you're not going to riot, but kind of still, like, if you go back to Edward Bernays, so he's like the father of public relations, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and this was coming all out during the beginnings of World War II, and the concern was that people, if they think too much, that they might become discontent with things and riot and cause, all this world destruction. And so kind of the idea was like, let's numb them with consumerism.
And
Let's keep
bread
everybody,
circuses too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Let's just keep everybody kind of entertained and not really aware of things, because they might come to some really dramatic conclusions that would lead to violence.
Consumer culture, numbing things.
But I want to go back to your friends who are off grid, because that is still based on a system of trust. If you don't have to go very far back in history, 150 years, when a title to land could just be, we don't feel like giving you that right now. When we kicked all of the Native Americans off of their land, right? We had treaties with them that said this belongs to you. And then when we went to them and said, oh, wait, there's a natural resource on here that we want. And they said, well, we don't want to sell this to you. And then we said, well, you can either sell it to us or we're going to take it. So you might as well. And some tribes said, well, no, there's no such thing as selling land. Like, it was like selling air, or selling sunshine. I mean, that was that inconceivable to them. So if the government comes along, or if another government
Eminent
comes
domain, right?
into,
Yeah.
yeah, eminent
Yeah.
domain, so you are still based on the system that title that you own, that you have registered with the county or the district or whatever, that will be respected, just like the dollar will be respected.
And as long as you can pay taxes on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Right. So if you can't pay the taxes, that'll go on auction. It will no longer be yours, right?
exactly.
So we
Exactly.
don't really own it the way we
No,
think we own it,
no.
right? Yeah.
And it's really interesting. My husband and I have been to Alaska, and Alaska's in kind of the last real frontier. Like, they're really not managing a lot of that state, and you can actually live off the land if you can figure out how to do it. There are ways to, without having to pay taxes, you could go and fish and hunt. And if you could build shelters out of just the resources that are on there that you don't have to pay for, out of a store or something like that, and you're not building a permanent structure, that you can just kind of be there. Now, not very many people are willing to do that, but that's kind of the ultimate freedom. And there's very few places on the planet now that have that, where that land has not been basically appropriated by some entity, and then you get to decide, they get to decide, well, who gets to buy this? I mean, our country has been so irrational in that, like, no, you have black skin, so no, we won't let you buy that. So it is very, I say, we're operating under the system that we are. It doesn't make any sense. I know lots of people who, back in the 60s, so I have relatives who grew up in the 60s, and they thought, they were really anti-institutions, really anti-government, didn't think that they could trust the government, right? So they didn't put money into accounts. And now there are a lot of them who are dependent on the government for their livelihood because they were anti. So I'm like, let's prepare for the system that we have. That's the best we can do. And you get to decide what your values are. We'll talk about, is it your value to try to be independent and in your years, or do you want to let your children know that you expect to be able to live with them? And if that's your cultural value, then we need to have a talk around that, and we can bring families in and we can say, this is the way that your mother, your father want to live, and let's get your input on that. This is the rationale behind that, is that they used their resources to give you life and to build up your possibilities, and this is the expectation, and people can decide whether or not they're going to participate that way.
Yeah, that's a whole nother. Well, I'll just address that really briefly. And not everybody has this view, but my parents have done everything for me, basically. And I will never be able to repay them. And I actually had a talk with my mom really briefly about this, and she said, "Well, you never asked to be born." And I thought, wow, I never even thought of
That's
that.
true.
But if I'm willing and able to help them, I will, because they've done everything for me. You know what I mean? Now, interacting and actually how that plays out, that's a good
Yeah.
spiritual practice. Let's just put it that way.
There you go.
Very, very, yeah, you have to be very spiritually adept to spend extended time with family,
Josh,
for sure.
I'm
Yeah.
just going to chime in here that you
Sure.
have formed a narrative around that you're fine with helping your parents out, like that. And
Well, I say that when the rubber hits the road, we'll see what it actually is. Yeah, we'll see what actually happens, Yeah.
but you've just happened to have this story in your mind that makes that seem like palatable to you.
Well, I think it's more responsibility than it being palatable. I mean, it would be great if I didn't have to do that, or I could, just get away with taking all that that they've provided and helped me with throughout my life, and then just not doing anything in return. That would be great in a way, but I would feel not responsible in such a way, or just to put them in a home too, out of not even asking them what they want to do or something like this. You know what I mean?
So what's really interesting is that when you interview caregivers, we're going off on a little bit of a tangent,
It's okay.
but
It's
it
all
is
related.
this idea of like some cultural ideas that we have in the United States really don't hold water when you really test them. The idea that we want ease. So you said it would be really great if I didn't have to do this. We are really not very well built to have ease. It actually is kind of destroying us. Our abundance in this day and age is destroying us. We are built for struggle. We are like the chicken and the egg, that if we don't push at that very hard shell, we won't be strong enough to survive. The research is called anti-fragile, being anti-fragile. So it's not just that we do okay with struggle, it's that we actually need it. So caregivers, it's a very interesting when you research with them, and most people say this about just about any struggle that they go through, but they'll say, that was the hardest thing I ever did, and it was the best thing I ever did. Like the growth and the meaning, and you talk about responsibility and just being able to reflect about, who you have become in that experience. People say, well, I'd never choose it, but having had it, I wouldn't go back to never having had it.
Well, sure. And we're not going to, we're a human, right? There's no way we're going to get out of this or have a human life without any kind of struggle or pain. So I don't have to go out of my way to bring on unnecessary struggle and in hardship, because it's going to happen no matter what we want. So to me, it's almost the opposite, where, okay, I need to train the mind in order to see the stress and in order to address it. Because no matter, at least I feel I don't have to take on extra because I have enough to deal with already. And I would say most people do. So the thing is identifying it, seeing it, and then how do I best view it and how do I best respond to it? I feel so much of us take on this badge of honor of being busy and accomplishing, but actually, and you're right, we're not geared towards ease. It is a practice, and it is one that restores our nervous system and can allow for greater wisdom and heart quality too. Now, I will totally say that we shouldn't deny it or turn away from it. We should definitely turn towards it and address the stress and challenges we are doing.
The trauma is when we're not processing.
Exactly. Not running away, not numbing out, not distracting all the time. Sometimes that's actually healthy when it gets too much. But that's right. So actually it's counterintuitive to turn towards it and address it. I wanted to ask you too about where I didn't mention the word nest egg, but I guess what I was getting at is more higher level financial things. Talking about like maybe high net worth individuals or institutions and things like this, or people part of maybe an investing club or something like this that are maybe squirreling away some money. They have this bigger goal. It's going to take a lot of money. And what's the best way to go about that without the traditional thing of like borrowing money from a bank or trying to go through certain investments and stuff? And I guess that's okay, depending on what you want to do. So that's what I meant by kind of amassing more money until I have enough that I don't have to be dependent on, the fiat currencies, or not, no, I'm sorry, not fiat, but like having to pay interest back or having to get involved in a lot of financial products that I don't understand. Then
Not
we have the
getting involved
derivative
in.
market. I mean, that is to me, so complex, people
Mm-hmm.
buying on margin,
Mm-hmm.
all these
It's extremely
complicated
dangerous.
financial things, right?
Magnifies your risk.
Right. And so many people doing these complex financial transactions, making a lot of money. And then who is all on the blunt end of that too? I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying, okay, I mean, and I'm not necessarily like what kind of regulations needed. We've got corporate welfare, we've got all these different loopholes. We've got, offshoring, trusts, holding companies,
Mm-hmm.
obfuscation. So it just goes on and on and on, laundering, rigging markets, order spoofing in the metals markets. So there's just no end to the shenanigans and rigging. And if to me, to make it really easy, it's the defilements, greed, based on ill will, and then delusion or ignorance, where the wisdom is lacking. So those are the root of it. But I guess if there's a question in there,
Mm-hmm.
just going back to what we said about storing up money temporarily instead of circulating it, if we have a huge project in mind that's going to take some amassing of wealth temporarily in order to go forward.
Without using traditional methods like borrowing or sharing equity. I mean, those are
Well,
the two
yeah,
main
I guess we
ways.
could do both. Yeah, I guess we could do both. And though that reminds me to one more thing on the plate here. I would love to have people under $1 million net worth be able to get involved in private equity. That's where I feel the world can really change for the better.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of investing in, like, just say like a McDonald's or, another
Sure, a publicly
big
traded
name
company,
stores.
which is, yeah,
Exactly.
you can
Yeah,
get
yeah,
into the unicorns and stuff like that.
yeah.
So there are reasons why they call them sophisticated investors or something like that. Like you have to have a certain amount of liquidable wealth to,
Accredited
and
investors.
accredited
Yeah.
investors. So, and the reason for that is, all of these things came out of the Great Depression and the SEC's rules of, people were taking advantage. People will always take advantage until somebody regulates them not to. And that's the big debate in human thought anyway. Like the beginnings of this country, John Adams versus Thomas Jefferson was like, will people do the right thing for the right reasons, or will they need outside influences to tell them when to stop and to self-regulate? And that's the big question that's being answered with self-government is, are we going to be able to do that? So if you have a big project that you want to do, then there is these new ways of what do they call them? Cost sharing, right? So it's like I put my idea out there, and before I have actually made a product, people are already investing in it. And I get messages around these all the time in some of the newsletters that I have, that you could go to they could put on an online webinar, something that tells you this is my idea and I need to generate capital, and we're not really buying shares, we're kind of in this together, and then you're going to participate in the growth of it, and but you're not really being lent to, and nobody's promising really that this is going to do what it's going to do.
Like crowdfunding. Is
Yeah,
that kind of that
crowdfunding.
model? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Yeah, so
Instead
the
of
crowd,
VC instead of like that, those
yeah,
models.
that's one way around that. That's one way of saying, hey, if my idea is good enough, if this goes viral, wasn't it? I mean, there are definitely good examples of those crowdfunding methods that did eventually get big enough to go public, or be in unicorn status. And so that's one way. And in today's world, with our technology that can connect us, then we can have access to more than just the people in our, it used to be like you're borrowing money from everybody that and now it's like, well, everybody that could be across the whole world. So I would say crowdfunding would be in that. You're kind of going around the whole regular a market system. Nobody's telling you how you have to use that money. The ways that you're promising, the things that you're promising them, it's very minimal promises. I don't even know what their legal rights are to, you know, down in the future. But it's kind of this, again, this trusting thing of like, I believe in what you're saying you're going to do. So there is that. Other than, if you have a big project, I think you have to participate in most, usually in the financial system that we have set up, if you're trying to have access to that, to those large amounts of capital. Unless you can pool together people who have like a specific skill, like let's say you're trying to build a company and you need, and this happens in companies, right? Maybe you're bringing on somebody whose skill set is technology, and you're bringing on somebody else's skill set who's engineering, and you're bringing on somebody else's who's is marketing, and you're all saying we're going to do this project together, and we're putting in our sweat equity, and then maybe you're bringing in somebody and their contribution is capital, but they're still not any more of an owner than any of the other people that have brought that in.
That's great. Yeah, I would just love for the rules to change where we can just regular individuals could be invested like on a stock level on private equity, right? And be able to like vet the founders and have more opportunities. And so, yeah, when something gets so huge, it kind of takes on a life of itself. The word corporation is like on a corpse, right? Yeah. And then, then these things, you could actually have more influence in these smaller companies too. Yeah. And get people involved. So I wonder what would it take to change the rules around this, Yeah.
Ooh. Josh, I didn't know we were going to go there.
But like you said, I think that the reason it is like $1 million net worth or like $200,000 a year is so that people can afford to lose on these things, right?
Yeah, that it's
because if everybody's doing these risky investments, then the whole system could go in the tank really quick. I guess that's the understanding around it. But I mean, things have changed quite a bit since then, I think. But I don't know.
Well,
I don't want to put you on the spot here because this is a really off the books question kind of thing.
No, I love getting into the philosophy of it. I think if I'm ever on again, maybe a little bit ahead of time of where you think we might want to go, and then I could come with some really great
It's a good point.
ideas about that. The economies have risen and fallen because what people want is, it's like we know we want some freedom, but we also know we need security. And we are wired for connection. This is how human beings got to be at the top of the food chain. We're not faster. We're not stronger. We don't have bigger claws. We don't have bigger teeth. We had to work together. And so the people who, in our Paleolithic ancestors, those who didn't want to be part of the group and who were like, just F you, I don't want to have anything to do with your stinking rules, they went off and got eaten by tigers and didn't live long enough to reproduce. So we want to be together, and we want to cooperate, and we want to trust. But then what happens, of course, is in a group that gets big enough, somebody's going to take advantage of that trust. And then all of us have to protect ourselves. And that's the state that we're in America. And that's the state we're in the world. I mean, and we know that this is happening with AI. Like, we kind of recognize that we're going into territory that could be very dangerous, but we know if we don't conquer it, then our enemies will. Our enemies will figure this out. And so that's the justification of, it's always, that's what created, mad in the Cold War. Is just like, if we don't have the weapons to destroy them, then they're going to create the weapons to destroy us. If we don't create the technology that, could rule the world, then somebody else is going to rule over us. And so
really fear-based, totally fear-based.
It is fear-based because somebody has taken advantage of our trust. I believe that we are born believing that everybody around us has our best interest at heart. And then we're taught otherwise.
That's right. And it's another control mechanism, fear, for me, like that this kind of, I would say, false rationalization around it. It's based on people's fear. But the thing is, we're going to have to die anyway. And are we going to do it correct? I mean, where's our courage? Where's our principle? What are we willing to stand up for and say, okay, this is enough. I don't consent to another group of individuals saying on my behalf to send other individuals overseas to kill strangers and saying I consent to that. I don't, this is pretty radical thinking in today's society, but at the end of the day, none of us make it out of it alive. So what's the most important thing here? I know that's a little bit extreme for most people to consider, but to me, feeling into this state of fear and anxiety of we have to, or they're going to get us kind of thing, to me, that's not a good quality of life for my heart to be at. And that's just me. And I have I have no right to tell anybody how else they should live their life. All I can say is
Right.
we can't aggress on another. Of course, people have a right to defend themselves and their loved ones and their property and things like that. I'm all for that, even if I choose maybe not to do that. No one has a right to aggress on another. And then there's so many dirty tricks with intelligence agencies and psychological operations to fit people into this, and so much cognitive dissonance, and on and on and on it goes. So I want to take
Josh,
it.
this is the very first podcast interview I've ever had where we got into any of that stuff, conscientious objection or whatever. And if we're going to go there, then it really is like around money
for me.
When around money, it's like, what do you want to leave behind? And I have often thought, I have 3 kids. It's like, what example do I want to give them? What is my life worth? Would I say to my children, my life is worth, let's just look at Gandhi for a second. He said that you will bring people into that space of love and connection, which is the only place that connection can happen and where we're really at peace. And your life is worth giving to that cause. And so when the people would kneel down and let people kill them, then it would turn their hearts, right? It cost a few lives. It cost several millions of lives. But what he was saying was, but what you get back, he's thinking you're giving to the world more than your life. Your life is this one thing, but what you're putting out into the world by dying through love is going to radiate and permeate and, resonate all throughout all the generations of time going forward. And is that worth that?
Well, it's interesting you say that. And I wouldn't frame it exactly like that, because to me, that is sacrificial. And to me, that's just another blood sacrifice, which with old religion, for me, it's a slight change, but I'm just into non-harming. So they can't put a gun in my hand and make me kill a stranger. They're going to have to pull the trigger, right? So it's just a commitment to non-harming, because ill will is never overcome by ill will. Only by non-ill will, ill will ever be overcome. And this is an ancient and eternal law. So it is such a radical thing to say.
You'd have to get everybody on board, because once one person decides,
practically,
I'm going to take advantage of all those people who trust that we're all in this, not without any ill intent. And then one person goes, wait a minute, I could just take what I want out of this and not, then we all have to go, whoa, we put our walls up, we put our defenses up, we get our own guns, we say, this is mine, this is.
Sure.
And then who rules the world?
That's on them. Everyone is responsible for their own thoughts, speech, and action. I can't be responsible for anyone else's. And it is the long term. And it really doesn't make sense if we get more spiritual with a lifetime after lifetime. If we believe that this is it and it's eternal pleasure or eternal damnation, well, then our whole outlook is different than seeing, there's something else after this, and it just keeps going on and on and on until we get out of the cycles of birth and death. But I mean, that's getting a little bit in the weeds here too.
The ancients they thought more that way. They thought more like, I would rather die than basically sell my soul to the devil. And in that terminology, my life isn't worth acting in controversies of my values. Like that was just a given. That was just like, kill me. But that's, we cling to life so much now, and we are identifying with our physical form in ways that, because a lot of people aren't believing that there's something beyond our essence is not this thing that you can touch and feel.
That's right. And it's easier for me to say this, right? I don't have children to protect or provide for.
And that's the other
so it's real easy for me to say that.
Do I really orphan my kids for this?
Exactly, right? So you're in a whole different, and most people are in a completely different mind space and heart space, because it's not just about them and their principles. Like me, I have the luxury to do that. So my heart's open to that it's not an easy choice. That there's so many causes and conditions that are involved. And when we say things, and I sit in my little philosopher chair here and say, it's different when, some really big challenge comes that it doesn't work out the way I planned for. Really. Right. Exactly. That's absolutely right. Go ahead.
Well, I'm actually kind of a student of World War II. I really I really like to study, especially the psychology that was happening around that time. And they were met with that exact challenge very frequently. Like, do I stand up for this Jew and risk going to prison or being killed and orphaning my child? Like, which one is worse? And you just to be constantly faced with that challenge of like, okay, is it really me who's doing this? But we are all of us kind of consenting to things that we probably, we wouldn't if it was just placed before us. I mean, if you take the 2008 stock market crash, no, we didn't go to war like with guns, but how many people, the health costs, the early death costs, the family and relationship costs, like from people deciding that money was more important, than living an ethical life. That was all very man-made, and it definitely, you could measure the loss of life from that event where people were saying, we just want to take mortgages that we know aren't very good, and we'll collateralize them, then we'll stick a label on them that says that they're actually good. What underneath there is all crap, and then we'll sell them as something that should be in every investment plan out there. And then when it all crumbles, it's like we're all scurrying to get our chair, like the musical chairs thing, and
Who's left
people
holding the
die.
bag?
Yeah,
Yes.
who's left holding the right. And the vulnerable, even people like who just trusted that the system was going to do what it was going to do. So yeah, that's we're all in that.
I think this is a good leeway into, that it's based. So World War II, in a way, maybe it's more hard, it's more vivid. I mean, not more hard, but it's easier to see because it's clear, right? It's very, very kind of clear choices that can be visualized. We're talking about financial things like this in soft power and a war on consciousness and, psychological operations and intelligence agencies and all this stuff. It's a little more subtle, a little bit harder. And they're trying to kind of harvest consent, assume tacit consent. So if you don't speak out, then they just assume you're going along with it, right? How many legal documents do we sign just because we want user agreements that we just want to get onto it, right?
Right.
So it's really a challenging world we live in. So how can we take our lessons from the past in the 2000 to some of the things I'm hearing maybe on alternative media, like, okay, there could be a completely financial reset, maybe good or bad with AI. You mentioned AI. It's a huge topic now. And cryptocurrency, and maybe if that gets in, the big concerns are if they do away with cash, everything's online, that they could cut off one's resources, and then they can track and trace
anything
for control and for them to enrich
hacked.
themselves. Yes, that's right.
Anything online can be hacked, which is why people are stockpiling precious metals, because they're like, well, they're at least not hackable. But again, remembering that everything is still based on trust. So if we're going to move to cryptocurrency as being the way that we trade goods and services in this country, it has to be a massive shift. We all have to be on board with that. We all have to say, okay, we trust that when you give me a certain, crypto coin, that I'm going to be able to take that crypto coin and turn it into goods and services that I need in the market. And we haven't caught on to that. It's not regulated enough. People have lost fortunes in ways that we said, well, shoot, no, we can't trust that. Right. So understanding that it all will come back to trust. It will all come back to like, what have we all decided that we're going to live by in mass? And it'll always be this teeter-totter between individual, what I want to do, and what the group needs to continue as a community and civilizations. So what I try to teach my clients is to try to add some consciousness to your relationship with money, to try to say, what can I do differently because I mean to, because I'm mindful about it, whether it's spending less on things that really aren't in alignment with your highest priorities and goals, or whether it's giving more to organizations that you feel are in alignment, whether it's investing in a certain way. But understanding, this is why I use my 7-layer framework. If you go to my website, Breakthrough Financial Wellness, you can see it described there. The top one is societal, understanding that there are certain things, because we do live in society. If you want to live off-grid in Alaska, I think you can do that without having to deal with taxes and people and all of that. But most of us can't do that. And so once you decide that you're going to live in this civilization and in this society, you have to also understand some of this was created outside of our control. And we can do our own little parts. So Josh is trying to do it in his little podcast, getting us to try to think more deeply. I'm trying to do it in these ways of helping people come to a little bit more consciousness around their money. I've got people who are special ed teachers, right? They're just trying to help kids learn how to read, right? Whatever your little contribution is if it's in alignment with you, because it's a wonderful thing. We're like a big, huge box of crayons and we all have something unique to contribute. And recognizing that we want to leave this world having done our part.
Well, I think that's a beautiful place to wrap up. I really appreciate that. And yeah, don't think that it doesn't matter, because there is a cumulative effect, right? Drop by drop, a water bucket's filled. So if we're making choices that are skillful and benefiting ourselves and others, that's going to accumulate, and vice versa. Yeah, not to take too much importance but don't write it off as unimportant. Little me can't do anything.
No, we're all energetic beings, and the energy that the frequency that we're giving off, if it's greed, if it's ill will, if it's selfishness, then that reverberates throughout, the whole universe and comes right back to us. But if we reverberate love, if we reverberate where we have goodwill, where we're saying, look, we understand that the system is rigged to not help us all live according to our highest values. There's just no way. To be an ethical consumer would mean you couldn't really be in the group. So just recognizing that we have those limitations, doing the kind of acceptance work that might take, at the same time that you're saying, but where do I make my contribution, and how can I live with that, and being okay with that?
That's a beautiful balance, and practical too. So Jennifer, thanks so much for coming on here. Why don't you mentioned it once, but remind people again where they can get in touch with you, and anything else you want to plug, like if you have courses, workshops, seminars, books, how you work with clients, if you do one-on-one, anything else you want to plug too.
Yeah, we're working on getting all of that stuff. Our flagship program is for young couples. So it's 12 lessons, it's 14 weeks. Right now we're in our pilot stage, so it's very affordably. I'm not sure when you're going to release this, but anyway, if you come on to Breakthrough Financial Wellness, it's a lot of letters, but it's very easy to spell out. So Breakthrough Financial Wellness, you'll see our programs on there, one-on-one coaching, couples work. A lot of financial wellness specialists won't go into couples work because that's more difficult. Families, so like where you've got inheritances being talked about, and you need to have conversations around that. We know that most inheritance money is gone by the fourth generation. Again, energy transfer. So deciding what you really want to do there, and then communication around that. So work with anybody. It just depends on the kind of support that you feel like you need. And then more programs coming. So we've got free resources on there, read blogs, and we have downloadables for you to do some exercises to try to help you get into some of this thought process, exploring your belief system, things like that. And then we are looking to have programs for older couples, mid-career, near retirees, and retirees. They just need a different kind of set of information than couples in their 20s and 30s. Parents, that's on our radar. People in the financial services industry who have some very interesting financial wellness things to consider themselves. People in nonprofits. So when you're working for in a different sphere than you might be in a profit world versus a nonprofit world. Yeah, we've got trying to get something for everybody out there, but I'm pretty sure everybody needs some support in this journey. But you can go on and get our free resources, Breakthrough Financial Wellness.
All right. Thanks again. And may all beings everywhere come to know their most optimal financial wellness for themselves and for others, and for all beings everywhere. May all beings everywhere realize awakening and be free. Bye now.